How's it going, everyone? My name is Rinzler here, back again for another video, and welcome to my review of The Amazing Spider-Man 1, released in 2012, directed by the very ironically named Mark Webb and starring Andrew Garfield. Now, this is coming off of my review of the Sam Raimi Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy from the 2000s, and as you guys know, I do very much love that trilogy, even though it has some faults, particularly in the third movie. And even though I do think that Spider-Man 4's script sounded kind of weak, and I totally understand why Sam Raimi kept vetoing their scripts because he wasn't liking them, which is the big reason Sony canceled it, because they basically said, pick a script or you're not doing the movie. We're on a deadline here. And Sam Raimi basically said, "Well, I guess I'm not doing the movie," because he was disappointed with Spider-Man 3 and he didn't want to give people a Spider-Man 4 that was, another disappointment. He wanted Spider-Man 4 to be the best film in the series to make up for Spider-Man 3's shortcomings. And he felt like if he couldn't do that, then he didn't want to do Spider-Man 4. And I totally understand that. And I would rather not get Spider-Man 4 than get a terrible Spider-Man 4. So I'm totally on board with that. So now let's talk about the remake, because um, after Spider-Man 4 was canceled, Disney did approach Sony to incorporate Spider-Man into their burgeoning MCU, which they initially were receptive to, but ultimately declined in favor of doing a full reboot on their own, which led to this film, which at one point was going to be made into an MCU film. Oscorp Tower from this movie was actually going to make an appearance in the first Avengers movie during the Battle of New York, but and that ended up being cut out when Sony decided they wanted this to be a standalone universe. Um, so anyway, let's get into my personal connection with this. As I mentioned in a previous video, I was born in 2001. So by the time I was old enough to really appreciate the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, they were already done. I wasn't really old enough to appreciate them as they were coming out. So for me, The Amazing Spider-Man was really the movie made for my generation, because I was 11. I was 10 and I was about to turn 11 when The Amazing Spider-Man 1 came out. So this was really my generation's Spider-Man in a way. Like the Tobey Maguire ones kind of were too, but they were more for kids that were born in the 90s, I feel. So for me, The Amazing Spider-Man 1 was more the one that felt catered to my generation, if that makes sense. So I have a personal connection to it in that way. But even in that regard, I didn't really care for this movie when it first came out. I felt back then that it was lacking in the fun of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Like this movie, I felt took itself, maybe a little too seriously for its own good, if that makes sense. Um, and in a way, I still kind of feel that way, but I'm not as negative about this movie as I used to be. I've actually kind of grown to like this movie more, especially now that I understand what it was trying to be. Because when this movie came out, I had never seen the Dark Knight trilogy. Like I missed out on the hype of that trilogy, and I actually didn't watch the Dark Knight trilogy until I was already deep into my YouTube career, as a matter of fact. Like people sometimes ask me if my 2019 video where I said Batman Returns is my favorite movie is still true. It's not, because when I made that video, I had actually never seen the Dark Knight trilogy. So that's a fun fact. But now that I've seen the Dark Knight trilogy, I kind of get what the Amazing Spider-Man 1 was trying to be. It was trying to be the Spider-Man equivalent of the Dark Knight trilogy, a gritty, grounded reimagining. And I don't hate that they try to do something different tonally and visually, because this is also a very dark film. There's not a whole lot of scenes in daylight. And in post, they actually deliberately tinted scenes to look darker. They wanted this to be a darker, grittier, grounded Spider-Man film, which I don't hate, because it's actually one of the few things that this movie does that's really original in and of itself. Because unfortunately, a big criticism I have to give to the first Amazing Spider-Man is that it really is quite redundant of the first Sam Raimi film in a lot of ways. Um, it has pretty much the same theming of Peter feeling responsible of Uncle Ben's death and Uncle Ben's death leads him down a dark path, and he has to kind of discover what it means to be Spider-Man. And we have a villain that Peter has a personal connection to as a sort of father figure, because Uncle Ben couldn't relate to him on the science side. I've talked about that in my review of the first Raimi movie, that I like the fact that Norman could kind of bond with Peter in the scientific level in a way that Uncle Ben couldn't. So they had kind of this surrogate father son dynamic almost. And the first TASA movie does the same thing with Peter and Kurt Connors. And, I get why they went with Kurt Connors, because they had been building up the lizard in the second and third Raimi movies, and then those movies ended before they could pay it off. So it made sense to have the lizard in this, to finally actually do the lizard after years of building up with no payoff. Like, I totally get it. But with that being said, I do think a lot of the lizard's best scenes were left on the cutting room floor, or I should say Kurt Connors, because Rhys Ifans is a fantastic actor. Okay, like I thought he was amazing in House of the Dragon. And I actually thought he gave a pretty fun performance in Venom 3. Where he was not playing Kurt Connors. A lot of people thought he was going to be, but he wasn't. And he was barely in No Way Home. He might as well not even really been in No Way Home, if I'm being honest. Like, they did not give nearly as much love to him in the Sandman as they did the other villains in that movie. I have to say. Um, but yeah, I think the Lizard is fine in the first Amazing Spider-Man. He's totally fine. Unfortunately, a lot of his best scenes are left on the cutting room floor, like the scenes of him with his wife and his son, and how he wants to have his arm because he can't lift his son like all the other parents can. Like, his son wants to be lifted, but he physically can't. Like, I wish they kept that in. And they do actually keep in one really good scene where he puts his arm up against glass, so he has a reflection that looks like he has two arms again. I actually really like that. I thought that was really well done. But other than that, he's quite a generic villain in my opinion. And his plan of turning New York City into a bunch of lizard people is just kind of silly. Like, I just can't take it seriously as a plot. It's too silly for its own good, and it kind of contrasts with the gritty groundedness of the rest of the movie. Because, like, if that had been in a Raimi movie, it would have been kind of fun and over the top. But here, it just feels kind of like tonally out of place. Like, you get whiplash from it almost. Um, and I don't know. I also kind of don't like that they kill Captain Stacy so quickly. I think that if they had let him live longer, they could have done more with that. And I kind of wish they didn't have Peter reveal he's Spider-Man to Gwen in the first movie, because I don't know. I just feel like it was a little too fast, maybe. I feel like they could have gotten more mileage out of that, and then they wouldn't have had to kill Gwen off in just the second movie. They could have held that off for like the third or fourth movie if they'd gotten that far. I think they may have blown the load a little too quick in that regard with this movie. Um, but yeah, people also gave a lot of criticism because they didn't like that Andrew Garfield was playing Spider-Man. They didn't like him because they thought he was too conventionally attractive, because Peter's supposed to be a big nerd. And they chose to kind of reimagine Peter as more of like a punkish a more of a punkish loner than a straight up nerd, even though he does have scientific inclination. But I actually don't mind that. Like, he has a skateboard. He's more of a punk than a nerd, and I don't hate that, honestly. Because, like I said, like, from a structural standpoint, and from a character arc standpoint, this movie has a lot in common with the first Raimi Spider-Man. So the fact that it does have a grittier, grounded tone, and it has a different kind of Peter Parker, I like that it does have some originality. But with that being said, not all of the originality is good. I will admit, I despise the part of the movie after Uncle Ben dies where Peter is going off looking for Uncle Ben's killer and kind of being a criminal. I don't hate that from a character arc standpoint. I think that makes sense, and that had potential for growth. I hate the fact that he's Spider-Man when he does it. I hate that he has the suit already when he's doing it, because I don't know. I just don't like this idea that like because they do this big heroic scene where like he gets the suit for the first time and it's this great first person shot and it doesn't feel earned because he's still being a bad guy. I don't like that. I don't think it's structured the right way. I wish that they had saved him getting the suit for the first time for the scene after he saves the little boy on the bridge. You know what I mean? Like I wish that like when he saved the little boy and gave him his mask, that he gave him that mask for good and then came out with a better mask, like the proper Spider-Man suit. Like that's what I wish they had done. I think that would have landed better emotionally. And now let's talk about the suit actually, because a lot of people hate the suit in the first TASM movie. I actually don't. I actually don't hate the suit in this movie, even though yeah, the texture looks a bit basketball-y. Like people do say that. I do agree with it, but I don't hate it. I actually think it has a charm to it. I actually kind of like the sunglasses lens. It fits the style that the movie's going for, like the darker, more gritty, grounded style. I think it actually works pretty well for what it's trying to do. Um, so that works. And it's a bit of a slower film, I will say. I think some things do feel a little dragged out, and it does feel like there are scenes missing, like important scenes for characters. Like I said, I don't think the lizard has enough scenes to really make his character as tragic as it should be. And I think Uncle Ben's death is not as sad as it should be either, despite the fact that Andrew Garfield's performance is really good in Uncle Ben's death scene. I really feel the pain of it, just as much as I did when Tobey Maguire did it. But for me, I think it's undone by the fact that Uncle Ben's death is not well handled here. Like, I think it's almost better that we don't see him get shot directly in the first Raimi movie, whereas in this one, we see Uncle Ben make the decision to go after the gun and struggle with the gun, which I don't know. Like maybe this is me being hard, but I always thought that made Uncle Ben kind of look like an idiot, if anything. Like I don't know, like with in the original, you really do feel like it's an innocent old man that was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But here, it's just an old man that's like kind of being an idiot, in my opinion. I'm sorry. It just doesn't land the right way because I think it makes Uncle Ben look bad in death. Like it makes him look less like an innocent old man in the wrong place at the wrong time and just more like someone trying to do something noble but just kind of being dumb about it. I don't know. It just doesn't land the way it should. And also, something I loved about the original is that it was a result of Peter not stopping that guy from stealing from the arena. And you got why Peter didn't stop him. Like in the moment, it made sense. But then there's a consequence of it. And I love that. It really does good things for his character arc. But here, it's like it doesn't land because Peter's in the store and this guy's not giving him his milk because he's like a penny short or something. Which makes the guy look like an asshole, yeah. But then Peter tries to take pennies from like the leave a penny charity thing that convenience stores do. He tries to take those pennies and like give them, and the guy understandably won't take them. He's like, you can't do that. So it's weird. So like when Peter refuses to help him, it's like the guy was an asshole to him and Peter was an asshole to the guy. So I don't know, it just doesn't land the same way for me. Like that's the theme of this movie is that everything it tries to do that was done in the Raimi movies is done worse here, at least in my opinion. The one thing I will say this movie does 100 times better than the Raimi movies for me is the romance. The romance in this movie is much, much better for me than the romance between Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man and Kirsten Dunst's Mary Jane Watson. Um, because I always thought their relationship was pretty toxic in that trilogy. I went on great detail to talk about why I don't like their relationship in Spider-Man's 2 and 3 in particular. But in these two movies, I love Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone because they were a real couple at the time, and you really feel that. They feel like a real couple. Their interactions just seem like interactions real couples would have, and I think that really works. Even though and I don't like that they have him reveal who he is to Gwen so quickly, Their chemistry is so good it almost works still for me. And I actually think they made a mistake killing Gwen off in the second movie, even though that scene is really well done, and I'll get to that when I review that movie. But I do think it was a mistake because their chemistry was so good. It was one of the only things about these movies that everyone agreed was good. And that's actually a strength that Mark Webb has, because Mark Webb was coming off of a uh, like a romance movie background. He was coming off the success of directing 500 Days of Summer with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Zoe Deschanel, which is a great film. So I think he definitely brought that kind of indie filmmaker like rom-com style to this movie, and the romance is, in my opinion, like probably the best aspect of his duology because of that. Well, in the second movie, it gets messy because they break up and get back together again a shit ton of times. But in this movie, anyway, I think it's great. It's probably the best thing about this movie. Um, Visually, also, the special effects are really great in this film. Even though a lot of it's at night, I think it's very well shot. Like, there's this scene in the movie, like at night, and Peter's trying to escape from the police, and he swings right into the spotlight from a helicopter, and it's so gorgeously shot. Like, you can't even really tell it's CGI. It looks really real and really good. I think this movie honestly is a very beautiful movie from a special effects point of view. Aside from the lizard, whose design I really don't like, I think he looks just too weird. They try to make him look more humanoid, and it just looks off to me. Even though I will say I think he looks better than Killer Croc in Suicide Squad. But yeah, I don't like the Wizard's design much, but for the most part, this is a very visually stunning film with great action sequences. And Like I said, I think the suit's underrated. I love the web shooters that he creates. I love the web shooters, and I actually like that they flash red when he shoots. Because even from a distance, they manage to they keep that detail of them flashing red when he shoots the webs, and I actually really like that. It gives a unique kind of visual identity to his Spider-Man, when he swings, and I really like that. So yeah, overall, I actually think the first Taza movie gets a lot right. I think it has great special effects, underrated costume. Andrew Garfield, I think for what they asked him to do, is great. Even though he's a different Peter Parker, I actually do like his take on the character, and he really brings it in the emotional department. He's probably the best pure actor we've had in the role of Spider-Man, in my opinion. Um, he and Emma Stone have really good chemistry. Uh, you know, I don't know. I think this movie gets a lot right, but it does get a lot wrong. It's quite redundant of the first Raimi Spider-Man movie. It does basically a lot of the same things, but none of it is good in my opinion. The Lizard is a very undercooked villain, and I don't think it plays to Reese Ifans' strengths as an actor, because a lot of his best scenes were cut out. It's not always the best paced movie. It can be a little slow at times. And a lot of Peter's character arc is not well handled, in my opinion. Like I said, the moment he gets the Spider-Man suit is too early in the movie, and it doesn't feel earned. He's still hunting down Uncle Ben's killer. I really wish they had waited until he was not doing that anymore to give him the full suit. I think that would have landed better you know. But yeah, I do also like that he's quippier than Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man was. He feels more like the comics and the cartoons in that regard, so I like that as well. And I don't hate that it tries to be a more gritty, grounded Spider-Man film. It gives this movie a more unique visual identity from the Raimi movies. Um, but yeah, and like I said, I have a bit of a nostalgia because this was the first Spider-Man movie that really felt like it was made for my generation, so I have a connection to it for that reason as well. Um, but yeah, I think the biggest problem with this movie is that it lacks fun. Like, this isn't really the most fun Spider-Man movie. It's almost too serious. Like, I said that I didn't hate that it tries to do something different. I actually didn't mind it, but I will say it's not as fun to watch as the Raimi movies. It's not really as funny, and it does take itself almost too seriously at times. But a lot of the emotion doesn't feel earned because of weird pacing, and like I said, him getting the suit too soon. And the lizard scenes being cut out. A lot of the emotional beats don't hit the way that they should, and Uncle Ben's death. You know, I just think a lot of it doesn't hit the way it should. I will say Sally Field's Aunt May, fantastic, very underrated Aunt May. There's a scene where he comes back and he's all beaten up, and Peter's begging her to just like forget about it and just go to sleep, and she's like, "Don't you understand? I can't sleep." And I really like it. I really do sense the connection between Sally Field's Aunt May and Andrew Garfield's Peter. Their connection feels lived in and earned, and I really care for it. I don't like the mystery around Peter's parents in these movies. The opening scene, in particular, I think is really weird. Like the first time I saw this movie, the opening scene threw me off. Like I just didn't get it at all. Like it's this weird hide and go seek scene where Peter just randomly puts on his dad's glasses, and then like his office is all ransacked and his dad comes in or whatever, and he's already like in a sour mood. And of course in TASM 2 we find out it's because like he said he was playing hide and seek with his son, but he was actually going to the basement to do a video like message. I don't know, it's just weird. I don't like the whole conspiracy with his parents. I didn't like it in this movie, even though it's a much bigger problem in the second movie. I still didn't like it here. Because they go over that a little bit in this movie too when Uncle Ben and Aunt May talk about it with him. I don't know, it just doesn't land. I don't think Peter's parents are important to his story at all. Like Aunt May and Uncle Ben are the important ones. Peter's parents shouldn't factor at all, in my opinion. Like I admire them for trying to do something different. I just don't think it worked. All right, like that's all I can really say about that. Um, so yeah, overall, this movie has plenty of good in it. I think Andrew Garfield is a good Peter. I think Sally Field is a good Aunt May. Emma Stone is a great Gwen, much better than Bryce Dallas Howard, in my opinion. Reese Ifans is underused, but I don't think he's bad or anything. And Flash Thompson. I actually like Flash Thompson in this movie. I don't remember the actor's name, forgive me, but I do like him. I actually think he's probably the best Flash we've had because, Joe Manganiello, however you say his name, he was just kind of a generic bully character in the first Raimi movie, and then Tony Revolori's Flash is funny, but he's so different than the comics. It's not even the same character. So I think this Flash is the closest we've had to a comic accurate Flash Thompson, and I actually really like him. I love. I think the scene where Peter is like playing around with him with the ball and like he throws the ball in the back of his head. That's a funny scene. And then later on when Peter is like devastated by his uncle's death and everyone at school is staring at him and Flash comes up and actually tries to comfort him. I love that. I really like that. And I love at the end that he's like wearing the Spider-Man shirt and stuff. Like I think Flash is great in this movie. I think he's kind of underused. Um One of my biggest disappointments is actually that he's not more featured in the second film. He actually only had one scene in the second film, and it was cut out. Which I thought was a bit disappointing. Um, so yeah, overall, I don't like this film as much as the first Raimi or the second Raimi, but I do like it more than Spider-Man 3. It's definitely not an awful film. In many ways, I think it's an underrated film. It does have enough good going for it. But a lot of it just feels weaker in general. Sally Field's a good Aunt May, but she's not as good as Rosemary Harris. Andrew Garfield is a great Peter, but he doesn't emotionally resonate the same way Tobey Maguire did. You know what I mean? And yeah, just stuff like that. Martin Sheen is a fine Uncle Ben, but he's not. You don't feel for him the way you feel for Cliff Robertson. But there is some improvement. Like I said, Emma Stone, much better love interest than Kirsten Dunst, in my opinion. Much better performance than Kirsten Dunst. Overall. Obviously, I said that Kirsten Dunst has her moments, but overall, I think Emma Stone is better in her films than Kirsten Dunst was in hers. That's just my opinion, of course. But and I think the Lizards, yeah, he's not as good as he had the potential to be a great villain, but he's not as good as any of the villains in the Raimi movies. Although he was better than Venom and Harry, I will say that. But he's just very underused. So yeah, overall, I know I keep saying that. Overall, visual effects great. The score, really good. James Horner's score in this movie is so underrated. I actually prefer his score to Hans Zimmer's in the sequel, which is another hot take. I think the suit is underrated. I think Andrew Garfield in general is a very underrated Peter, even though he's not quite as good as Toby, in my opinion. I thought, yeah, Sally Field was a good, but not as good Aunt May. I thought Martin Sheen was a serviceable Uncle Ben. I thought I thought Reese Ifans was fine. I thought Flash was great. I thought Flash was better than he was in the Raimi movies or the Holland movies. Yeah, so overall, I think The Amazing Spider-Man 1 gets enough right to not be a bad film, but not enough right to be a great film either. This is a very middle of the road Spider-Man film for me. I do much prefer, like, Spider-Man 3 is more fun to watch, but as an actual film, TASM 1 is definitely a better film. And one I've like I haven't gone back to it as much as I should. I actually do like TASM 1 a fair amount. Despite all my criticism for it, I still very much enjoy it. But yeah, so overall, I think TASM 1 is a middle of the road film. It's not one of the worst films, but it's not one of the best films either. Uh, but it has enough good in it that I would still recommend watching it. So overall, I think I'm going to give The Amazing Spider-Man 1 an okay. But above the okay I gave Spider-Man 3. But anyway, guys, let me know if I missed anything you thought I should mention about this movie in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with all your friends on all your various social media platforms. I fully intend, of course, to review The Amazing Spider-Man 2 after this, so make sure to look out for that. And I'll see all of you in the next video.